The Shroud of Turin has been one of the most talked about and controversial pieces of artifacts in human history, due to some claiming that this is the cloth that was put over Jesus after he was crucified and put in the tomb, while others are saying this is a hoax and this was actually put on a different individual at the time of the medieval era. Well, new research and study has actually shown shocking evidence for this cloth.
The Shroud of Turin. It is, without question, the most sacred and controversial pieces of cloth on the planet. For some, it's a mere hoax. For others, it is nothing less than a testament to the transformative life, death, and resurrection of Christ. But the conclusions from a recent scientific study are shocking even the most ardent skeptics.
Now, we're going to see in just a second this new evidence that could prove that this shroud is, in fact, the shroud that Jesus was buried in.
Scientists from the Institute of Crystallography of the National Research Council applied what's called a wide-angle X-ray technique to study 8 small samples of fabric from the shroud. The technique enables researchers to actually examine the garment at a microscopic level, enabling them to determine the time the shroud was actually manufactured. The results of the X-ray examination were astounding. Scientists have confirmed that the shroud was indeed manufactured approximately 2,000 years ago, during the same time period Christ lived, was crucified, and, as the shroud testifies, rose again. Now, this study, of course, contradicts the rather infamous 1988 study that used carbon dating to locate the origin of the shroud to the medieval period, over 1,000 years after the time of Christ. And that, in many respects, closed the case for many skeptics with regard to the authenticity of the shroud.
So now we are seeing that studies have been done just recently that are dating this shroud at the time when Jesus was walking on this earth, doing his ministry, and then crucified on the cross. And there's even more deeper evidence that is pointing more and more to the potential of this actually being the cloth that covered Jesus.
Now, this microscopic study is actually but the latest in a whole string of studies that collectively do appear to authenticate the shroud. For example, another study from a few years back confirmed that the blood stains on the shroud were in fact human blood, and most fascinatingly, it was the blood of a torture victim. It was a study conducted by Italy's National Research Council and the University of Padua's Department of Industrial Engineering. That study concluded that the man wrapped in the Shroud of Turin suffered a strong, what they called polytrauma, or multiple traumatic injuries. The research was published in a peer-reviewed academic journal. It made quite the stir in the academy. And what's so interesting here is that the conclusions of this study corroborate earlier ones that did in fact conclude that the remnant stains on the shroud were in fact human blood, that previous studies determined that the blood on the shroud is in fact real. It's human male blood of the type AB. It's a rare blood type, present in only about 3% of the world's population. And these studies found a high concentration of the pigment bilirubin, which is consistent of someone dying under great trauma or stress.
You know, it's interesting that so many people from decades ago and even present time have tried to figure out what Jesus actually looked like, because there is such mystery in that. You know, we've had painters and artists, and people say they've had visions of Jesus, and people say they have dreams of visions, and all those things of Jesus. And they're trying to create what they believe he looks like. And so with this new evidence, you really just leave it up to the viewer. Is this potentially the cloth that covered Jesus after he was crucified on the cross and buried in the tomb? Or is this simply just some cloth that was put on a different individual who did suffer immensely? There's still mystery in that. But one day, guys, as I say so many times, we all will face Jesus face to face. and we will see him. And on that day, he will either look at you and say, "Well done, my good and faithful servant," or he will look at you and say, "Depart from me, for I never knew you." And that all comes down to how you, as an individual, look at Christ. Is he your Lord and Savior? Have you surrendered your life to him? Or is Jesus not your Lord and Savior? If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to the BTteam Ministry YouTube channel, as well as drop a like and leave a comment down below. I would love to know your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this video, you might like this one over here.